Okay, hello everybody and welcome. My name is Rabbi Fishman, and I have recently assumed the new responsibilities of Director of Adult Learning at Congregation Shaar Hashomayim. Part of my responsibilities, as well as teaching in person, are also teaching virtually online, and I'm happy that you're joining me here today online. I'm currently speaking to you from my home in Israel, as the Shaar Hashomayim has created a remote opportunity for me to be able to be a part of the team at the synagogue while simultaneously living in Israel. This is an incredible opportunity, which I'm very grateful for. And I'd like to commend and publicly thank the leadership for their forward-thinking attitude towards what it means in a post-COVID world to have people working for an institution. I know that the people in high tech were ahead of the curve many years ago, employing people from all corners of the earth. It's taken synagogues a little longer to catch up, and I'd like to thank the Shaar Hashomayim for being really one of the first synagogues, especially in Montreal, the first, to find such an opportunity. Our class today is called The Content of Our Character, and I chose that title on purpose, not only because, does anyone know where that line comes from, by the way? The content of our character. Does that sound familiar? This was a line said in famous "I Have a Dream" speech of Martin Luther King Jr., where he's speaking about the end of racism. And he has a line where he says, "I believe," because you remember every refrain of that speech starts with, "I believe that one day my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but rather by the content of their character." It's a very, very important line, one of the great lines of the 20th century. And in many ways, that line can sum up all of Judaism. Of course, we're not judged by the color of our skin, but how are we judged? We're not judged on the size of our homes. We're not judged on our looks. We're not judged by our sense of humor. We're judged by the content of our character. And that really is a lifetime's work. God gives us the greatest gift that we can ever be blessed with, and that's life itself. But we start off life as a child extremely selfish, and rightly so. A child can't eat by itself. It can't do anything by itself. It needs to have food literally placed into its mouth, and it will take everything it can possibly take in order to survive. We start off this life on purpose, selfishly. But if we work at the job and service, the craft of living, of true living, then we can transform ourselves from the childlike selfishness with which we are innately born with into selfless beings, that by the time that we leave this earth, we can be known for people of compassion, for people of selflessness, for people of kindness, for people of patience, for people that are able to put others before ourselves. That really is the goal of what this entire project of our lives is all about. We could have had a class just on this subject. What is the purpose of life? But I'm giving you, as part of my introduction today, an assumption. The assumption is that our lives have the possibility for being beautiful. And a part of working on ourselves is literally realizing all of the different and the multitude of areas and where our interpersonal responsibilities take place. And so for this first month of November, I would like to study the theme and subject of truthfulness and integrity. It's such an important value in our lives. The theme of human integrity. And what I would like to focus on today and over the next 4 weeks as we learn together are the Torah's approach to lying. Can you lie? Are there ever times where maybe it's permissible? Just to what degree does the Torah feel that we should never tell a lie? What does it mean to tell a lie? If you remain silent, are you able to lie in silence? Are a person's body language and the way in which they perhaps roll their eyes come under the category of lying? When are there moments where we can tell something less than the truth? Can there even be opportunities where it's a mitzvah to avoid the truth? These and a variety of other subjects that are connected to this subject are part of the themes that I would like to address and look at with you today. And so without any further to do, I'd like to jump straight in. I'm usually not a fan of people that spend over half of the class with an introduction. So now that I've spoken for 5 minutes of an introduction, let us jump straight in. And I'd like to jump straight in by sharing a source sheet with you, and hopefully you'll be able to see my screen as I share my screen with you. By the incredible power of technology, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I see that, oh, I am Shaar Hashomayim, that's me. So I should certainly be one of the administrators of this video. I should certainly be one of the administrators of this video. Let's see what happens. No. How do I? Interesting. It's not letting me share my screen from what it is that I would like to share with you. So how am I going to do this? One moment. No, I don't want a virtual background. Okay, this is good. These are all of the early mistakes that we're making. And you're going, of course, at this point, everyone's now getting access to the video. We're getting inundated with people joining the class. And what are they going to see me with for the first few seconds of the class? They're going to see me fumbling, being unable to share the screen. Okay, bear with me. Okay, so I'm going to not share my screen with you, and instead I'm going to be reading out the source sheets. Okay, I'm going to be reading out the source sheets, as I think that will simply be a lot easier, and we will not waste time with me figuring out why I have not been given administrator status. Okay, so let us begin. Here we go. We start with a verse from the Torah itself. The Torah teaches us in 3 words, amazingly, midaver sheker tirchak. Midaver sheker tirchak, which means a person should distance themselves from falsehood. Now, the first thing that I would like to point out with this verse from the Torah is, notice what the Torah doesn't say. What could the Torah have said when it would have approached the concept of lying? How could the Torah have phrased this mitzvah? It could very simply have said, do not lie. After all, the Torah says they're negative in many examples. Who can tell me an example where the Torah will say do not? I mean, they're in the 10 commandments. They're straight. It's very straightforward and straight and very simple. Shout one out. I think everyone is muted. Unmute yourself and shout one out.
Steal.
Do not steal. Excellent, Terry. Shout out another one. Somebody else.
Thou shalt not covet.
Thou shalt not covet. Excellent. So, and do not kill. We have in the 10 commandments, do not make other gods besides me. There are 365 negative commandments out of our 613. Isn't that fascinating? And the Midrash, a rabbinic commentary, picks up on this and says, 365 negative commandments. It's as if every single day has its own day where a commandment is being shouted out into the world. Do not break me. Do not break me. Every single day, another of the negative commandments is being pumped into this world. So we could have said, do not lie. The Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says, midave sheker tirchak. Distance yourself from falsehood. What is meant by that phrase, distance yourself from falsehood? As opposed to saying it simply, who would like to suggest an answer? Anybody? Distance yourself from falsehood. Why do you think it says it that way?
Because then there's
broader statement.
Sorry, we had two people speaking at the same time. Daniel, go ahead, please.
Because it's more than just lies. It's falsehood, it's doubt, it's bad beliefs, it's all types of things that make you doubt things, make you doubt your faith, make you doubt everything. So it's everything that's false is categorized under this, which is not just lies and direct lies.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. I did not see the verse in that way. That is so interesting. You've just taught me something new, which usually happens when we learn with one another. But what Daniel is suggesting is, it's not saying don't lie. Okay, the sky is green when it's really blue. That's a lie. Did you steal the candy? No, I didn't steal the candy when it was a lie. That's one type of lie. But there's something about falsehood. Falsehood could be a matter of mistaken beliefs. Perhaps the belief that there is more than one God. That would be, according to Judaism, a mistaken belief. That would be falsehood. And the Torah is teaching us, don't just only not lie, but secondly, there is a whole slew of beliefs that you could mistakenly, erroneously believe. Remove yourself from mistaken beliefs too. Fascinating. What an interesting way of looking at the verse. I did not think of that when I read it. Thank you. Somebody else, there was someone else speaking at the same time. I didn't see who it was though. What could that possibly imply? Midave sheker tirchak. Distance yourself from falsehood. Who would like to make a suggestion? Anybody? So what I initially thought is that so fundamentally bad is the concept of falsehoods as from the perspective of lying, that the Torah wants to stress in the harshest way possible. It wouldn't be enough to say, do not lie. We have to put a verbose language associated with this. Distance yourself from falsehood. Now that's shocking, because if that is correct, that this is so central to the Torah's endeavor, that lying is fundamentally bad, what this means is that it's much worse than murder. It's much worse than stealing. It's worse than adultery. It's worse than jealousy. It's worse than coveting your neighbor. Because all of those previous examples, the Torah just says, don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't covet your neighbor. It says it simply, do not. And fascinatingly, the Torah actually, perhaps, and this is where I would like to explore, perhaps the Torah is telling us, I need you to be extremely far away from falsehood, because this is fundamentally worse than any of the other negative commandments, so much so that I need to use a verbose language of distance yourself. Now, why? If that is true, the question is why? Why might that be the case? What is wrong with lying that for some reason or another, the Torah feels that it has to go out of its way to say there can be nothing worse? That's an open question. I'm going to develop this, but let me hear from you. I want to make these classes interactive. If we're already one step removed, learning virtually with one another, let me see if I can create an interactive nature to these classes. So if this approach, that lying is so fundamentally terrible, is the right approach, why is that true? Why is that the case? Why might you think? Yes, Gina, if you want to, I'll unmute you. Can I unmute you? Yes, go ahead, Gina.
So what I'm thinking of is, God is the absolute truth. So anything that is false is the antithesis to what God represents, which is the golden, of course, the beyond golden standard. So that's what comes to mind there.
Gina, what you're saying is fascinating. And I'd like to explore this idea a little more in our next class. But if I can give you a little taste, I'm going to follow Gina's line of thinking, and we're going to focus on this next week. There's a connection we have between God and truthfulness. In the language of the Midrash, the way in which they portray this connection is very interesting. They give an imagery of a signet ring. Do you know what a signet ring was? A king in the ancient world, when he wanted to sign a document, would burn wax. The wax would melt. He would seal the document with wax, and then his ring was indented. And the signet ring, from the word sign, obviously, he would press the ring into the hot wax, sealing the envelope. There was no envelope, sealing the letter, the rolled up scroll. And that way you would know it had not been opened. It was a way of guaranteeing privacy. But that ring, that signet ring, that sign of the king, was associated with the king himself. It was almost as if everything he stood for was wrapped up in that sign. Using the analogy of a signet ring, which was the world in which the sages inhabited, this was ordinary associations and metaphors for them. They said that the sign of God, the signet ring of God, is truth. It's as if God signs his name with a signature. What's God's signature? Today, kids stand outside basketball games hoping to get a signature of their favorite sports stars. God's signature, truth. And we're going to develop that, Gina, next week. But fascinatingly, in that line of thought, to lie, to destroy the truth, is in a way to destroy God's presence here in this world. Amazing. Amazing. Great answer. Somebody else. Why is the Torah exceptionally verbose? Why does it want to make such a big deal about distancing ourselves from falsehood?
I don't know if I can express it well, but I'm going to try something.
Please.
Is that when you're lying to somebody, you're robbing them of free choice. You're robbing them of the ability to do something right, and when you're taking them to falsehood, again, you're giving them the wrong information to do the right choice in their lives. And so therefore, I don't know how to say it, but it seems like it's the worst thing that you can do to somebody. You're manipulating them, you're robbing them of the truth, and robbing them of the ability to do what's right for them, what's right for their family, what's right for whatever. That's
an incredible point. I see that this is a more advanced class than I realized, because what Daniel has spoken about is something I was going to cover in lesson 3. So Gina has stolen my thunder for lesson 2. Daniel's jumped straight to lesson 3. I'm going to touch on it because I would like to address this point, but we're going to focus and expand on this even more. There is a concept in Judaism called gezelat dat, literally translated as stealing another person's mind. And what is an example of gezelat dat, stealing another person's mind, is when you give them misinformation and they would have no way of ever verifying if that was so. So an example would be, let's say I speak to Rabbi Shaar, the rabbi at the Shaar, later tonight in Israel. And he says, how many people came to your class? And I'm like, oh, forget about it. There were 1,000 people at the class. You missed something amazing. So what happens in that moment where you're misleading somebody intentionally, and they have no way of verifying, you're controlling their view of reality. That is an exquisite form of abuse. And amazingly, the sages have great contempt for this form of gezelat dat, of stealing a person's mind. Because while we can steal a person's objects, I can steal your umbrella, I can steal your coat, I can steal your money, I can steal your objects, physical objects, but I can also steal your consciousness. This is a much deeper level of entering and exploring ideas of falsehood and of lying. And in that moment, I'm actually asserting myself over your very consciousness so that I start to control your beliefs and your understanding of the world. And there is nothing that could ever, it could just be an exaggeration. You come back home from the supermarket. I'm thinking of a benign, silly example. How was it? Oh, I was there for ages. I was lining up. It took me so long. It was a disaster. Now, you might just be frustrated because there was one person in front of you in the line. But what's happening in your representation of that when you get back home? The other person is now thinking, my gosh, this is awful. You've had a terrible, terrible experience. You've controlled that other person's experience of reality when you've dramatically exaggerated an experience that you've had. So it doesn't have to be like a cynical type of thing where you're trying to get the other person to do something for you. You could be in the most benign, ordinary of circumstances, but your exaggerated response can now have very far-reaching consequences in how the other person is seeing your world.
And a lie has only one intent, which is to change your view of the world.
Right, right.
That's the only intent it has.
Amazingly, if you have been taking my in-person classes over the last 2 weeks, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I'll say a one-liner for those of you who were with me in person. The sages say that the snake lied. Okay? And the snake therefore wanted to overpower Adam and Eve, because a lie is an overpowering of another person's consciousness. Fascinating. I'm not going to go into the Garden of Eden anymore. If you were in my classes, I might have scared you away with the Garden of Eden, but the snake lied. Yes. Okay. Allow me to develop this. Sorry, was there a hand up? Did somebody else want to? Vivian, please. Where? Yes, please.
It is easy to say do not,
Yes.
because you just follow an order. You don't have to think. You know already you cannot do this. By distancing, you are taking a space for you, but a space for the other person to maybe realize they have another story to tell and then repair themselves. And for us to give them this chance, and for us also to see the complexity of what is happening. So I think it's giving a chance of a growth process for each one.
That is very, very
The person who
interesting.
lies and the person who listens to something.
Distance yourself from falsehood doesn't just mean I should distance myself from speaking falsehood, but I should distance myself from the other person to allow for the miscommunication that may exist between us. That is
Yes.
a fabulous reading. It is not the simple meaning of the verse, but it would be considered a Hasidic twist on the verse. So I don't know if there is any Hasidic blood in your family, but that would be that would be a fabulous rereading of that verse, which is fascinating. Thank you. Yes, Richard has raised his hand. Please, Richard, if you can unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes, I'm unmuted. I'm interested in the connection between exaggeration and distance yourself from. When you distance yourself from, you're on a spectrum. There's a calibration, so you can get close, you can get far. Whether or not you are telling the truth and you're distancing yourself, exaggeration is distancing yourself from the truth. It's not an exact, a complete lie. You know, there's a whole range of exaggeration, and sometimes exaggeration, you know, is not people exaggerate. We're not expected to take them literally. Somebody says, you know, I was waiting forever in the line. Well, you know, the person wasn't waiting forever, but then you judge, well, is this a person who exaggerates? You know, who always says things in very binary ways. You know, it's either dark or light. It's never in between. So for that, forever may have been, you know, 5 minutes may have been less or more. And people exaggerate because it's dramatic. So exaggeration, I don't think we should. I'm suggesting we don't take it literally, except when, you know, the context is such that the person who's exaggerating is meaning for us to accept the exaggeration. Somebody who says, you know, the hurricane, you know, went all the way from east to west Florida, and that person's in a position of authority. Well, that exaggeration is closer to what you said is a lie, because I'm thinking of a former president who drew his own drew his own hurricane with a marker to confirm what he had said rather than admitting he was wrong. Distancing yourself can also be the opposite. Instead of being a stronger Torah prohibition of you know, this is the worst possible thing you could do. Distancing yourself could be, well, just move a little bit further from the lie, so that, you know, you're not telling a complete lie. Maybe you're marketing, maybe you're exaggerating, but you know, don't distance yourself too much from the truth.
So you're taking the negative prohibition of lying and the way that the Torah is referring to it as distance yourself from falsehood, and you're softening that prohibition and saying exaggeration is okay. Exaggeration is okay. Distance yourself. You don't have to completely be removed from a world of lies, but just distance a little bit. And we as humans inhabit a world of exaggeration, hyperbole,
and we know
fascinating.
And we know how to judge whether exaggeration is.
And based on the context of our interpersonal relationships, we know when a person is prone to do this. That's very, very interesting. I'd like to go a little deeper, and I'd like to share with you. I'm not going to do this inside. I was going to when you could see the text, but as I'm unable to share my screen, I'm going to say this outside, so to speak. I want to go to the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch is a fascinating book written in the 1400s. It was written by a father to his child. And what he did is he took Maimonides' count of the 613 mitzvot, and he wrote the reasons for each mitzvah. It's a fabulous work from the medieval period. Maimonides had already become famous at this point, and he had made a list of 613 mitzvot. This author, the work of Sefer HaChinuch, literally the book of education, takes all of Maimonides' list and gives a very short paragraph. It's a small, thin book. He gives a short paragraph of the reason for each mitzvah. So we come to this mitzvah of the 613. This is mitzvah 74. If you've been, if you would like to take note of that, this is mitzvah number 74 in Maimonides' list. And the Sefer HaChinuch says as follows. He says, the root of this mitzvah is well known. This isn't a shocking mitzvah. This isn't a mitzvah which catches us by surprise. Falsehood is corrupt in the eyes of all. There's nothing more abhorrent, and curse is found in the homes of those who love falsehood. And then he says, and by extension, switching that, blessing is only found and will only take effect upon those who emulate God in their actions. So we come back to Gina now. And he continues, I'm reading direct quote. We should be truthful just as God is a God of truth. We should have compassion, as it's known that God is compassionate. And we should do acts of loving kindness, just as God performs acts of loving kindness. What the Sefer HaChinuch has done is he has created the concept of distance yourself from falsehood, and he has set it into the broader concept of imitating God's ways. We have a meta mitzvah. It's not one of the 613. It's not listed as a discrete singular mitzvah. It's a meta mitzvah, and it's called imitate God. How do you imitate God? And exactly as he had just outlined, God is known through certain behaviors. He's compassionate. He is slow to anger. He's an individual that is kind. And how else do we know God? He's known for being a God of truth. Do you remember where we say these attributes of God? We actually say them in the High Holiday service. They're known as the 13 attributes of mercy. I don't know the tune that the Shaar sings. I'm assuming it's the same tune because it's quite a popular one universally. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noseh Chesed L'Alafim, Noseh Avon V'Afesh. Yeah, do you have that tune? Does that sound familiar? Okay, good. Terry, was my voice off? Or I was able to carry that? Okay. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. You get more than you bargain for when you take a class. I'm going to launch into song. So if you look at the description of God in those qualities, we have God as he is Hashem, compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abundant in kindness, and a God of truth. Now, hang on a second. That sounds a little bit like one of the, excuse me for my example, but I've got young children at home. Do you remember Sesame Street? One of these things is not like the other. So how could we have, truth doesn't sound like it belongs there. Who's God? God is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abundant in kindness. These are very gracious interpersonal relationship traits and qualities. Slow to anger, compassionate, gracious. Sounds amazing. We would all like a friend like that. But if I was to tell you, here's a friend, absolute strict commitment to truth, it might sound like a little bit harsh. They might sound like a little bit rough around the edges. It might sound difficult to get along with. Why is truth a part of that list? Compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abundant in kindness, and truthful. Why would truth be a part of that grouping? Any suggestions? Because I do believe it actually goes, perfectly. Any suggestions? Yes, Jonathan. Jonathan, yes, please.
Perhaps if they're truthful, it means they're sincere in what they're saying.
Absolutely, yes. I was thinking something even more than that. You're right. You're absolutely right. I was thinking something more. Gina, yes. Sorry, say again, Gina. You were muted. Start again.
So the other traits I think describe how we relate to other people, and truth is part of that category, how we relate. So whether it be compassionate, whether it be kind. So that's how I see them fit in to the other descriptors.
I want to make sure I understand you. When you say how we relate to that person?
How we relate to others,
how we relate to others.
So I see truthfulness is a way of relating to relating.
Okay, absolutely. Absolutely. They're part of our interpersonal relationships with how we interact with others. Just as we can be slow to anger, we can be truthful with others.
But there's just one little tiny thing that I'm going to just slip in there that occurred to me and it refers to what you were talking about earlier, trying to embody godliness within ourselves. So if we speak falsehood to another, then it is an assault against the godliness in someone else, right? So if we all carry sparks,
Excellent.
and we lying, then we are not only offending that person, but we're offending their neshama, so their holy.
Excellent. I'm going to come back to that in the end. There's one more idea. I don't think we've hit the nail on the head. Daniel, yes, please. Why is truth part of that list of how we describe God's qualities?
I think it's because God wants us to have a relationship with him and he wants to lead us. And without trust, there is nothing. If God lies to us, then what are we to believe? What type of relationship are we to have with him? And then we just dispel everything he says. And so the fundamental piece is, if he wants us to be in his image, if he wants it to be like this, and he has this relationship that he wants to have with us, then he's first of all telling us that he's truthful, and second, that he also expects the truth from us.
I think that's precisely the idea. These qualities are relationship qualities. Could you imagine having a relationship with somebody that was rapidly quick fire to anger? It would be so hard to have a relationship with somebody like that. It would be so difficult. We would constantly be in a sense of, oh, I'm sorry. We would be so afraid because of the other person's anger. Imagine being in a relationship with somebody that just wasn't kind. We wouldn't be able to be in a relationship. Imagine a mean-spirited person that was just spiteful. We couldn't have a relationship with somebody like that. We have a word for people like that. We call them toxic. No one wants to be around a spiteful, mean-spirited individual.
Why would it, oh, sorry.
And 1 second, Alice, 1 second, I'll come to you in a second. And by extension, if we're going to be able to have a relationship with somebody, not only would we need them to be gracious and compassionate and slow to anger and full of kindness, we would need that person to have a sense of truthhood. I think that's what Daniel was explaining. Because if that person doesn't have a sense of truth to their being, then how are we going to ever be able to be in a relationship with them? We wouldn't have trust. Once you lose trust in a relationship, then the relationship crumbles. You can't have a relationship with somebody. Where were you last night? You were out late. Oh, I was with the guys. We had a poker night. Really? That's where you were last night, out late? So trust is everything. God wants us to be in a relationship with him. And therefore, God's quality is truthfulness. Richard has asked a question in the chat, which was, how do we know that God's attribute of a commitment to truth, other than those associations of the 13 attributes of mercy? That's the primary understanding of knowing that God is a God of truth. But it makes sense intuitively, because God is a person who wants relationship with his human subjects. This goes back to my introduction of what assumptions do we have. God creates the world. This is an assumption, and we can explore it on another occasion. God creates the world in search of relationship. Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote a beautiful book, and he titled it God in Search of Man. We like to think that it's humankind who are trying to find God, but maybe we should flip it on its head. It's God in search of man. God wants one thing and one thing only: a free relationship with free created creatures. And so from this perspective, that relationship has to be based on truth as well. But now I want to come to the final idea with you, which I believe is incredibly compelling. And again, I think Gina touched on it, and I think Daniel touched on it as well. And that is, being truthful is a crucial component of our very spiritual lives. our lives and the world in which we exhibit is a spiritual world. You know, sometimes people say, what are you? And you say, I'm a body, I have a body, I am a body, I'm a person. I'd like to share something with you, which is the flip. You are a soul and you have a body. I'll say that again, it's very powerful. You are a soul and you have a body. So if we are a soul, then the values that we hold, the mitzvot we upkeep, the transgressions we distance ourselves from, make an impact upon our spiritual inner world. And therefore, to distance ourselves from falsehood is to maintain a sense of purity of soul. Now, what's the hardest part of this idea is that you don't see your soul. You see your body. And so the person that goes to the gym, I discovered that there's a local gym around the corner from, this is bad news, because now I'm gonna, you know, don't worry, I'm not gonna go, but I'll at least have the thoughts of joining the gym when I walk past, but on my way to get a burger. So you don't see your soul, you see your body. So when you go to the gym, you work out, you can see the results, especially if you go consistently. Hey, you got really big muscles. Hey, look at you. You look great. Look at you lost that weight. Or look at your biceps. But our souls are no different than our physical bodies from the perspective of needing a workout. We won't call it a workout at the gym, but we'll call it a spiritual workout. Now, of course, simply doing something which comes easily is not going to build spiritual muscle. Just like if I can lift 100 pounds and I pick up a 5-pound weight, I'm not going to be building muscle. But it's in those moments of temptation, it's in those moments of challenge, it's in those moments of resistance, and I overcome doing what I believe and know is the correct behavior, it's then that I'm building spiritual muscle. And I want to go even further, because I just said you don't see the soul. But you know what? I bet you've all met people, I know I have, exceptional people, exquisite people, incredible people that are so holy and so pure that when you come into their presence, you see them shine. You can see it in their eyes. There's something about their face. There's something about standing in the presence of somebody so holy that you can even see the spiritual world. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. I hope you have. I know I have. And this is the depth of what it means to distance ourselves from falsehood, to realize that truthfulness is one of the foundations of the very health of our spiritual lives. I want to share a story with you. A story is told of one of the great rabbis of the 20th century. He lived initially in Europe and then made his way to Brooklyn. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. And he was an ultra-Orthodox rabbi who headed a yeshiva in Brooklyn. And a story is told about him when he saw somebody tell off a child quite harshly, a 6-year-old child, for putting their feet on the Shabbos table. He was invited to somebody's house for Shabbat. He was having lunch. And they had a 6-year-old kid. And what do 6-year-old boys or girls, I don't know if it was a boy or girl, what do 6-year-old children have a tendency to do? To be a little bit rambunctious. What did this kid do? He put his feet up on the Shabbat table. The host lost it on this child and gave them a stern telling off. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, used the opportunity to turn to the host, not in the presence of the child, but to turn to the host later and said, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You're actually telling off the child for the wrong things. Because I want to make you a promise. I promise you, when this child is 20 years old, they're not going to be putting their feet up on the Shabbat table. They're just being kids right now. And there are certain behaviors that kids will grow out of. And the degree of harshness with which you told off this child is not commensurate with the fear that you have in terms of the spiritual growth of your child. Because what does it mean to tell off? What does it mean to rebuke somebody? It doesn't just mean to give them hell. It means to help them. It means to assist them. It means to instruct them along their own spiritual journey. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky said, there's no way this little kid is going to grow up to be an adult and still put their feet up on the table. But you know what? If the 6-year-old is to tell a lie, that's when you have to tell them off. That's when you have to really instruct them. That's when you have to be able to offer rebuke. Because telling a lie when a child is 6 is not something a child naturally grows out of unless they're instructed to with a moral development. Because there are plenty of people that can reach adulthood and still be full of telling lies. So if you wanted to correct your child in an area, it will be in the area of being able to correct them in terms of their moral internal qualities. And I'll finish with this, especially once again in terms of our relationships with others. When we stand for something, when we believe in something, when we try to practice what we preach, what happens when others would see us undermining ourselves by doing something the opposite or contrary to the lives we believe that we should live? There is a moment of perception to the outsider looking in that can see an individual who professes to practice what they preach, and suddenly they don't. It undermines the entirety of the system. Now, I'm not talking about a person that tries to be good and tries to do the right thing, but doesn't always on every occasion achieve that. I'm talking about a moment of hypocrisy. I'm talking about that moment where the individual undermines themselves totally by their behavior. Because suddenly what they have pretended to believe in, to promote, has now been totally rejected by them. That moment in the eyes of others, but in the eyes of children, in the eyes of grandchildren, in the eyes of outsiders looking in, can be devastating. Because in one moment, a person can learn it's all garbage. This whole system, if this person doesn't believe in it, this person isn't upkeeping it, this person is undermining it, so then why should I care about it either? Now, again, I'm being subtle, making a subtle point. Don't think that I'm saying that this is an individual that makes a simple, innocent mistake. No, I'm not talking about that. We all strive to be better. We all make mistakes. Talk about a person that undermines the entirety of the system for which they have been trying to promote. That can be devastating. And as a result, this is why midava sheker tircha, we should remove ourselves. We should distance ourselves from falsehood becomes also important, because it can take that moment of self-undermining to destroy the entire structure. These are some of the introductory ideas that I wanted to share with you today as we touch on the topic of honesty and integrity, focusing on an introduction to this mitzvah of avoiding falsehood. Questions or comments from anybody, please. You're muted. Vivian, you want to hang on? Yes.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
You are saying that managing by values is key. And at every moment, you are perceived. The others see you and hear you, even unconsciously, at the level you are practicing that value.
Yes.
And if you are
Yes,
truthful,
yes.
or if you are kind, or they perceive, we have a sense of how authentic it is. So it detects authenticity. Managing by values, people detect authenticity.
That's a beautiful way of summarizing it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Good. Good.
And
Thank
it's key. And it is key. Like God saying, please be authentic when you are sharing example.
I love that. I love that. Good. And it's actually a meta authenticity, because it's not just be authentic, but my true self, says God, is truthhood. So you reflect my truthhood. So it's like a meta authenticity. Beautiful. I love that, Vivian. Thank you. Yes, Gina.
Nothing. I didn't want to say
Oh,
anything.
okay.
I just you both. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So I think everyone has my email. I'm going to put it in the chat bar, because if you'd like to follow up with me, I'm going to leave my email. It's rmf@theshaar.org. And it's there in the chat. If you'd like to follow up privately, I know that not everybody wants to always speak or speak up in front of a class. It's sometimes can be a little intimidating. But if you'd like to reach out to me privately, you absolutely can. And I'd like to thank you for participating in this inaugural online learning session with me. I'd like to finish by just letting you know that we will be continuing next Tuesday lunchtime at 12 noon. And for the following 3 weeks on this series of honesty and integrity as far as truth and falsehood go. And on the upcoming Monday, 6 days from now, which will be Monday the 14th, I believe, of November, Monday the 14th of November, and for the following 3 Mondays at 12 noon, we invite you to join us for an incredible museum exploration and tour, looking at Judaism in the ancient world, a clash of civilizations. We're going to be visiting the Berlin Museum, the British Museum, and the Israel Museum, all virtually over the next 3 Mondays. And we have an incredible tour guide who will be leading us. His name is Nachliel Sullivan, aka the Museum Guy. This is how he has branded himself, the Museum Guy. And we are in for a treat, as he's going to take us on a virtual tour inside of those museums. And to cap off the experience, on the 4th Monday, December 4th to 6th, we are inviting the entire community to accompany us on a trip to New York City, where we will be having a trip centered around a private day's viewing at the New York Met Museum, exploring their Egyptology departments, ancient Greece and ancient Rome. It promises to be an amazing experience. Please look at the Shaar website for more information. Hopefully you're receiving information online in emails about these upcoming programs. And if anyone would like to ask me questions, if you'd like to come on the trip or you'd like more info, please reach out to me. It'll be my pleasure. That's December 4th to 6th as we take a trip to New York. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope this was enjoyable, stimulating, and thought-provoking. Chew it over. Think about it for the next week. And I am going to send all of you, if you've signed up, I'm going to send you my source sheet, okay? This has been recorded, so I will send out a recording and I will send you the source sheet for you to look over, review, or listen to over this forthcoming week. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a great week, everybody.